Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, my name is Warren Speed, and at the end of March 2022 I went up to Loch Ness in the Highlands of Scotland to investigate all the many weird going-ons up there. We're not just talking about Nessie, the Loch Ness monster, which has been seen by countless people over the centuries, not just the decades, over the centuries. But not just Nessie. There's been plenty of UFO sightings, strange lights seen above the loch. There was actually some lights seen the weekend before we went up, which we've got pictures of coming up later. A bit of loads of people saw the lights above Drumnadrochit, Rocket, and we talked to a few people about them. There's also been quite a few weird paranormal ghostly sightings, some of them quite scary, particularly around Boleskine burial ground, which is just below the house where Aleister Crowley lived in, the famous occultist I'm sure a lot of you have heard of. And also me and Jamie, the cameraman, we had a very bizarre encounter ourselves while we were up there, which really put the icing on the cake of the whole documentary. More of that later, but it was featured in a lot of the Scottish newspapers, what happened to me and Jamie. But anyway, let's start with a cruise on the loch. Hi guys, I'm here with Sean on the, what is it, the Spirit of Loch?
Spirit of Loch Ness,
the Spirit of Loch Ness, which is quite appropriate, seeing about the content of the film, all about spirits and weird going-ons. But can you tell us a bit about the loch, some of the facts? And
Loch Ness, probably the most famous loch in the world, and probably the least explored, seeing there's been more people to the moon than the bottom of Loch Ness who really don't know what's down there. It's the largest threshold of freshwater in Britain. It's 23.4 miles long and average a mile wide, and average depth's about 182 metres. So you can fit the world's population into Loch Ness 3 times.
Really?
So there's room for it to hide a few spirits, so maybe a monster, as they say.
And how deep is it in the deepest bit? Because this is quite...
It's an arguable point because it's on a fault line. However, other people will find different depths with sonar, because as the fault line is moving, you will get little cracks.
Right.
However, right now, as on Google, as a fact, it's 240 metres. So that's pretty deep. So 120 metres down, if we went down, you'd be dead with pressure.
Right.
So it's...
But what's it convert to in feet? One of the deepest bits?
In feet, well, one of the spookiest things, and maybe something that may interest yourself, you may have heard of Aleister Crowley.
Yeah, we're doing a bit about Mr. Crowley, yeah.
So Edward is his real name, but known as the Beaster 666, and he was in a place called Boleskine House, which was burnt to the ground for maybe good reason, who knows. But if you line up the U-shape carved out by the glacier in the middle of Loch Ness, that means you're right above the fault line.
Yeah.
And if you stop opposite his house and you float in the middle of the loch and you check the sonar, the depth in metres is 203 metres, and that converts to 666 feet, and that scares the hell out of me.
Yeah, that's just totally bizarre, isn't it?
Puts your hair up on end. So if you want to talk about evil spirits and stuff, that's where you want to be, right opposite his house.
Yeah.
Mr. Crowley.
So, has there actually been any sightings of anything, from this actual boat, of the monster or Nessie?
Of monsters, well, this is the most famous boat probably in the Highlands at the moment. 2 years ago, on the 24th of September, we were doing our usual cruise route, and we used Ray Marine sonar, which is military grade stuff, and at a depth of 183 metres, during our cruise, a creature went underneath this boat, and we sent away the contact to Marine, and they came back with the data.
Yeah.
And they said it was a creature alive and moving, and it was 10 metres long and 1.5 metres wide. So this boat's 21 metres long, so that's almost half the length of the boat and 1 metre wide.
Yeah.
So what could it be?
No
You've heard
idea.
of Nessie, plays bagpipes, kilt, tartan hat.
Alright, yeah.
That's what we reckon it is. We're a lot closer than we ever have been of knowing what it is. We've got so much evidence right now we can't really prove the negative. The way to prove the positive is to catch Nessie, but you're not allowed to catch Nessie.
You know?
Have you heard of the protected species list?
Yep.
Right.
Guess who's on there?
Is he? Or she? Or they?
He or she. Something that can remain hidden and that elusive for many
Yeah.
years must be female. So we call it she.
Back with Sean again. We've been out on the loch. Haven't seen anything, unfortunately. Although I did see a few things on the sonar. And you've got, this is the one that went kind of.
This is the
global, or?
most famous contact in the history of Loch Ness. This is a creature alive and moving, recorded by Marine sonar on a range of 300 metres, 184 metres down. It's under immense pressure, and it's 10 metres long and 1.5 metres wide, and according to Marine sonar, it's alive and moving. What's in Loch Ness alive and moving, 10 metres long and 1.5 metres wide? The Loch Ness Monster. Nessie, of course.
Aye. And what?
Is that the Loch Ness Monster?
Well, I saw a couple of things on there earlier.
Sonar.
A couple of big.
It will tell you what's
Tony
there.
said were bigger than.
They're bigger than you, most of these creatures
Yeah,
down in there. The sonar will just tell you something's there, but unfortunately it doesn't tell you what it is. The only way to prove what's down there is to catch things.
Yeah.
Catching this down here at 183 metres is almost impossible. They've tried cages, nets, harpoons, dynamite, poison, dolphins with cameras. But things they have found which could explain the Loch Ness Monster are eels. You heard about eels?
Yeah.
Eels are very dangerous, curved teeth, they've adapted and evolved, they can give you an anaesthetic, they can give you an electric shock, they bite into you, they tie themselves into knots, rip the flesh from them, they pull you down, drown you. Don't want to mess with an eel. But eels can grow very big. This is the largest one ever caught in the world. This was caught in the North Sea behind Loch Ness.
Oh my days.
Oh my days is the polite way to put that, because that
Yep.
is 8 metres long and 1 metre wide.
Wow.
So that's 8
If
metres.
this lives in Loch Ness, European eels, which there are DNA for, if we found one 10 metres long and 1.5 metres wide, that's just a small one. But there is also another eel living in Loch Ness. It's 320 million years old. It shouldn't be here.
Yeah.
And it's a dinosaur. They're called lamprey. Now they're blood-sucking eels. Now these things here, we don't know how big they can grow. But you put a small fish in a small fish tank, it won't grow big. You put it in Loch Ness, it could grow very big. So, could you imagine a giant lamprey? Now that would be one for the horror films.
Because some people have said they've seen them crossing the road, haven't they? Though that kind of.
They don't have a swim bladder, so they have to deal with pressure the same with us. Some of them can move on land, they spawn on land
Yeah,
as well.
'cause
They're
some of the
very
reports did say
fascinating
them.
creatures.
They're like huge worms.
There was a very old sighting on the shores of Loch Ness. It's one of the most earliest one recorded, and the sighting is a man on his motorbike and he almost hits the monster. So if he almost hits the monster, he's either got a magical motorbike on Loch Ness or he's on the road and this thing is going
Yeah.
past him.
Aye.
So
Amazing.
giant eels moving about the loch. Pretty spooky.
Incredible. Well, thanks very much for the cruise, Sean.
You're more than welcome.
Yes, thank
Thanks
you
a
very
lot.
much.
The Next person I spoke to was a guy called Willie Cameron, who works for a chain of hotels around the Loch Ness area and does a lot for the tourism industry. I'm here with Willie Cameron in the Clansman Hotel. As you can see, Loch Ness is in the background. Willie is one of the founders, and you said it was named after the guy who died in the speedboat.
The company is called Cobbs, after John Cobb, that was killed attempting the world water speed record September the 29th, 1952 in his jet-powered boat Crusader. Yeah. Tragically killed out on Loch Ness here.
Yeah, that's bizarre. And just to go on to the Nessie, it was your father who had a sighting in 1965, a weird sighting.
My late father had a very, very strange, that's him there, Ian Cameron, a very strange experience on June the 15th, 1965, along fishing with a colleague of his, Willie Fraser, on the southern shore, about 10:30 at night. He saw out of the corner of his eye, just off Urquhart Castle, a black object in the water, and he immediately thought it was a diesel tanker had gone off the road and being empty, the buoyancy of the tank, and it was floating because the wind was coming from the west, from the Fort Augustus end towards Inverness. The way they saw the object coming, he shouted to his friend Willie Fraser, if this way this thing is coming, the projectile line of it looks like it's going to end up just past you, Willie. But as it came into his line of vision, he noticed that there was a sort of higher end, a bulk end he called it, and a narrower end, and it seemed to be rotating in the water but still going with the wind. Yeah. Totally fascinated by what it was. You could see then it wasn't a oil tanker, a petrol tanker, diesel tanker. So he was wanting to try and capture this. So there was a couple in a caravanette in the lay-by above, so he ran up to the lay-by to see if they had a camera. Unfortunately, they didn't have a camera, he didn't have a camera. As he said, you don't fish with cameras, you fish with fishing rods. They came down to the shoreline, and the four of them, Willie Fraser, the couple, and my father, watched the object, and as it got into a diagonal line with this building here, the Loch Ness Clansman Hotel, it suddenly turned, went against the headwind, and disappeared for a period. The whole sequence took 50 minutes from start to finish.
So if it turned and went against the wind, it obviously wasn't somewhat. No. Wasn't like a balloon. It wasn't floating. As he said, it had a power source. It had a power source, and the only way, it was either mechanical or animate. The only way you can have it is either an engine or flippers or something to go against the wind. Unknown to him, on the northern shore, there was a man, F.W. Holliday, Ted Holliday, who was spending his time with the Loch Ness Phenomena Bureau of Investigation, which had been set up in the 50s relative to trying to identify what was in Loch Ness. Holliday had at least 5 people with him on the northern shore. He identified through a telescope, unfortunately he did not have a camera, he identified the 4 people on the southern shore, made a beeline to go round the loch, down the other side, but by that time the gentlemen, Willie Fraser and Ian Cameron, had departed. Holliday found out from the people in the caravanette that they thought one might have been a policeman. He went in touch with Inverness Police Headquarters, and through a process of elimination identified my father, Ian Cameron, who was a serving police officer at the time of this incident. A week later, he appeared at my mother and father's house in Inverness. I was a 14-year-old boy at the time. Holliday came in, interviewed my father in a very much my father was not giving anything away, not embellishing the story, just answering Holliday's questions. Were you there? Were you fishing in Loch Ness on such and such a night? XYZ time. What did you see? Do you think it was unusual? Blah 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 blah. So that's the way it was. Holliday took the story, and he actually entered the whole of that story in his book, The Great Orm by Faber and Faber. The incident of April the 15th, June the 15th, 1965. Now the interesting aspect to this whole story was that Ian Cameron put a legal twist on it as opposed to the scientific twist. The scientists say categorically there is nothing there because the food supply is not large enough to sustain a creature or creatures that the eyewitnesses are seeing. Cameron put the argument on that if in a court of law
if there were 9 witnesses to an incident at that time, at that locus, who did not collude prior to the event, but the story was corroborated by a third party, namely Mr. Holliday, after the event, who took all the witness statements, published them in his book later on, you present that in a court of law, judge and jury would find in the positive. So he put a legal aspect as opposed to the scientific aspect, that there's nothing being there. As Cameron said himself, he says, I really don't care what it eats, it could live in fresh air for all I care. He says, because I saw it, but better than that, at least 9 other people saw it. And that put a completely different aspect on the possibility. What was it? What did they see? Who knows? He never said he saw the Loch Ness Monster, but he saw something that had a power source, went against the wind, that he could not explain what it was.
So, I mean, there's all the well, I don't know how many there is UFO sightings, but I mean, it could, rather than being some kind of fish, it could have possibly even been like a UFO kind of object if it was powered, you know. And
absolutely,
it was moving. You know,
absolutely, that it was something that was rotating as if it was searching for something, looking for something. Who knows how it landed on the loch or didn't land on the loch? I don't know. It could be a different aspect to put on the whole subject. But again, the whole thing, as far as Loch Ness is concerned, it's a huge piece of water. And over the years, people who have come looking for the monster and get totally frustrated by not finding anything, embellish the story, create hoaxes, create things in their own imagination for good, bad or indifferent. But there are people out there who have genuinely seen something, and for gain, fame or fortune would not come in front of your camera here, would not go in front of a journalist for fear of ridicule. And I know at least 3 people who are eminent, reliable, honest, and who would not tell you the story. They've told me the story over the years, because that's the subject that I've been involved in for about 30 years. But it's a fascinating subject. But it's not the only lake that's got a monster.
There's a few
all over the world. But this is the one that is. But at the end of the day, it's we have to believe in something. You know, we can't just categorically deny and obliterate everything as being straight normal.
Now, there can't be many individual father and son sightings of Nessie, but that's what happened to Willie.
Yeah, so I was photographing the sunlight, and a car drew in, gentleman got out, and I thought, well, he's been driving up the road, he's seen the shafts of sunlight, he's going to photograph that, and I was just about to turn to him to say, what a great picture, but the thing was, he didn't photograph into the sunlight, he flew opposite into the darkness, and I was just going to say to him, you know, you've missed the shot, why but he jumped in the car and drove off. So then Sunday night, 4 nights later, I decided to take a look at the pictures I shot, and when I was looking,
you turned around and took some shots the same way.
Yeah, I took shots around with my iPad in the same direction as he was shooting, and when I looked at the pictures, there was an object in the water going across the water. I also took a bit of cine movie on the iPad that night too. So very, very strange, creating a delta wing shape as if there was something underneath the water spreading out as it went along. Anyway, we got the pictures I got analysed by the Marine Laboratory at Dunstafnage, and they were blown up, and you can see most definitely a very, very solid object in both pictures. Now the winds were going in other directions, but this thing was going across the loch, so it's not relative to the wind whatsoever. As far as I'm led to believe, the laboratory thought it was animate, couldn't identify what it was. It definitely looked like it was under the water, breaking the surface of the water, fairly large, and creating a very, very distinctive delta wing shape underneath, which was showing that it was going up and coming down. It certainly wasn't a human being, and it wasn't a deer, and it wasn't a bull seal or normal seal, which is quite often come up the loch.
Right.
A bull seal's been seen up as far up as Fort Augustus chasing the salmon.
Right.
But what it was, I don't know.
So does that kind of fit in the plesiosaur? You know, that kind of theory of the old dinosaur. Does that?
Well, from
the fin kind of, does that?
Well, the fact that the delta wing shape was coming out, I don't think that was solid. I think that was the pattern underneath the water. of the wake of the object going forward was making, with the water breaking off it and going back. But what it is, I've no idea.
Yeah.
But I was very loath to go public with this, because everybody would just turn around and say, well, you're just doing that for added publicity. But what people don't realise, that I don't need to do anything for added publicity.
Well, exactly.
The publicity does it itself.
You've got 1.5 million people.
And every week there is something that is either controversial or relative to the Loch Ness phenomena story, and that's the way it's always going to be. It's not going to change. It's not going to end. It's not going to be like a newspaper that stops a run and that's us finished, or a television programme that comes off the air. The Loch Ness monster story, phenomena, whatever you want to call it, has been here since 565 AD with St. Columba's supposed sighting, or his very early marketing trick to get the Picts convinced that Christianity was the way forward. Right or wrong, I don't know, but anyway. And when they say that it was Queen Victoria coming to Balmoral that was the birthplace of Scottish tourism, and when they say that Sir Walter Scott writing The Lady of the Lake and the Trossachs was the birthplace of Scottish tourism, way before that, when St. Columba said he saw the Loch Ness monster, or that one of his followers made the sign of the cross, that to my mind was the start of Scottish tourism. So you're talking about
1,500 years.
1,500 years beforehand.
Yeah. So bizarrely enough, 3 days before we've come up here, there was some weird lights seen around this area, wasn't there? And down towards Urquhart Castle in the sky. I mean,
the Friday, Saturday, Sunday, there was various sightings from various different people around the loch of something fairly odd, fairly large in the sky, and of which quite a number of people took photographs of, but totally unidentifiable what it is. My own chef took some photographs, and I saw a light, but I don't think it was relative. I saw an odd light on the Friday night while having dinner here, but I don't think it's relative, because it doesn't compare to the lights that I've seen in the photographs.
The ones that have been seen, they were like kind of kaleidoscope kind of things.
Yeah, there were seemed to be colours in them.
Yeah.
We thought there might have been a drone, but a pretty big drone.
Yeah.
There was also the theory that it could be these celebratory lantern things that people send up, but to be in the same area 2 nights on the trot, again very odd, and with all the various colours and certainly the picture, they look like metal. They look mechanical.
And they were there for hours, weren't they?
And they didn't look like drone shape, or but again it was very dark, totally unexplainable. But lights have been seen over this area before. It's not rare.
Okay, I'm doing a Zoom recording at the moment with a guy called. Well, I'll let you introduce yourself. A well-known author.
Yeah, my name is Malcolm Robinson. I'm the founder member of research group Strange Phenomena Investigations. The aims of SPI are basically to collect, research and publish accounts relating to most aspects of strange phenomena, and to purposely endeavour to try and come up with some answers to account for what at present eludes us. I've written 10 books on various subjects, the likes of ghosts, poltergeists, UFOs, the Loch Ness monster, and I've lectured extensively both here in the United Kingdom and across Europe.
And you've actually been down. You've been down in Loch Ness in a submarine, haven't you?
Yes, very much so. I was very fortunate back in 1994 to get the opportunity to go down into the Loch Ness submarine. And that was sponsored by Swatch Watches. The submarine was around about 18 to 22 feet in length. It was red and white, and they were allowing certain members of the public to go into the submarine. You obviously had to pay for this, but this was to help fund the sampling, because they were doing core sampling of the loch floor where they would drill into the loch floor and bring out the soil sediments. And in effect, it's just like a tree with the tree rings, with the soil deposits. It allows you to understand the ecology of the loch going through thousands of years. So in 1994, I went down in the submarine. If you were claustrophobic, you certainly wouldn't like it. It was quite claustrophobic.
Yeah.
The dials, there were lots of instrumentation within the confines of the submarine, and there were even condensation dripping down the sides of the submarine as well. On the front nose of the submarine was a very, very toughened glass porthole, and outside was seven or eight very strong, powerful halogen lights. And we came out from Drumnadrochit, and it was just in front of the Clansman Hotel.
Yeah.
So we drove out into the middle of the loch and then descended. We went down to over 400 feet. Now, at the first 7 or 8 feet is very heavily peat-stained particles with all the peat, etc., coming off the hillside. But once you descend past that, it's crystal clear. And when we went down to, as I say, a depth of over 400 feet, the loch floor was just like sandy silt. It was just the odd rock sticking up. And as we traversed over the loch floor, suddenly it just fell away. It just descended into a chasm of blackness. And I said to the skipper of the submarine, "Can we go down there?" To which his reply was, "No, we've got to stick to an allotted course." And it was only about an hour's journey time, you know, but it was the best hour that I've ever spent in my life. Fantastic it was.
So was there any sightings of anything with the submarine, you know, at all, with anyone in it?
Not me personally, but the skipper of the submarine has said that they haven't actually saw anything, but they got something on their sonar, something about the size of your thumbnail. And he was convinced that that wasn't a group shoal of fish, which sometimes it could be, but it clearly was something very long, in excess of 25 feet.
Yeah.
And well, that was surprising, you know. But it was a wonderful experience, and I'd love to do it again, because I'm only one of a few went down in the submarine, you know.
Because you invented a potential kind of cage, didn't you, to possibly catch any big creature that might be in there?
Yeah, I mean, all my life I've been fascinated by the Loch Ness Monster. As a small boy growing up in Scotland, my father regaled me with the tales of this water kelpie, and I always knew that I would have to go up there. I've been up there many, many times, but in 1994, I took a phone call from the Scottish Sun newspaper, and he said, "Malcolm, Ted Danson is doing a movie about Loch Ness, and I mean, do you have any ideas how you could capture Nessie?" And I says, "Well, actually, I do, you know." He had just phoned at the right time, because about a week or so before, I had this idea. Now, if you can put it into your mind's eye, Warren, it's like a boxing ring, you know, you've got the four rings. Now, only it would be very tall, very vertical. And this would be secreted just off Urquhart Castle in the floor of Loch Ness. Now, on these ropes would be these spherical balls containing radio biopsy darts. And inside this device would be this machine, which is consistently and constantly turning out a kind of fish puree as a kind of attractant, like an attractant. So if you can imagine, this is like the boxing ring, this is the ropes with all the spherical balls. Any large body pushing against the ropes would automatically fire out all these radio biopsy darts, just like a grenade pin.
Right.
It wouldn't kill the creature, Warren, it would just neutralise it. And as soon as those ropes got breached, there'd be these lights just turning on the surface, alerting surface divers, "Hey, we have breached this trap, we need to send divers down." And, you know, this journalist, fantastic, he went away. Then a few days later, I got a phone call, and he says, "Malcolm, you'll never believe who's just phoned, and we've spoke about this." I says, "Who?" He says, "Steven Spielberg." I went, "You're joking." He says, "Yes." He says he's very, very keen to put up the money to help you make this plan succeed. And it was the talk of the town. It went all over Scotland, it went all over Europe, you know. But sadly, like certain things in life, Warren, it fell flat. And sadly, it didn't transpire. I still, to this day, firmly believe that this is a viable proposition. The only downside on that, Warren, is the fact that, as you probably know, Loch Ness is protected by an old Inverness bylaw. So anybody harming the creature or capturing the creature is liable to imprisonment, and that's an old Inverness bylaw. But it's a viable plan, yes.
That's interesting, that. Just moving on as well, because the documentary is partly about UFOs as well, and as I've said throughout the documentary, the weekend before we actually went up there ourselves, there was some lights seen above Drummer Rocket, but you've had a UFO experience around the loch as well, haven't you?
Yeah, that's correct. It was back in the 80s. We were doing some research, myself and my colleagues. We were interviewing various people who claimed to have seen Nessie, including Father Gregory Brucey, who had a long tapering neck and small head sighting in 1971 at Benedictine Abbey in Fort Augustus. We also interviewed Alex Campbell when he was alive, the former water bailiff who obviously propelled the Loch Ness story into the public domain with a lady's sighting, Aldi Mackay's sighting in 1933. But my own UFOs, I mean, it's not something you're looking for as well. So the story goes that after a day talking to various witnesses, we were gathered round a campfire at Invermoriston, and it was a lovely, lovely night, Warren. Beautiful starry sky, and you could see the silhouette of the hills on the other side of the loch. And my back to the loch, and there was an American lady, German people, Canadian people, tourists, you know, just stopped to look at Loch Ness. And then suddenly this lady screamed out, "What on earth is that?" And we all kind of turned round, and we saw this tremendous white ball of light bouncing above the hills on the other side of the loch. It was moving up and down. I knew straight away that this wasn't a conventional helicopter, it wasn't a conventional aircraft of any way, shape or form. I also was well aware that it wasn't the headlights of a car illuminating low-lying cloud, as sometimes that can happen. This was clearly something very peculiar. And suddenly it just stopped after all these movements and was gone in seconds. It took off at a tremendous speed. Now, part of my research and job is to ensure that what's in the sky is our own, so to speak. So I checked with the Royal Air Force, I checked with the Glasgow Airport, Edinburgh Airport, and all the national and provincial airports to see if anything was in the sky at that location at that time. There was nothing. Also checked with the local police to see if there were any members of the public who had perhaps phoned in with their own sighting that night. Again, nothing. So it clearly was truly an unidentified object, for want of a better word, and I have no explanation for what it was at all.
None of you got any pictures of it or anything?
Sadly, we didn't. You know, by the time I went to get my camera, that's the thing, and by the time the time you raised the camera, it was gone, you know, and it's, even if I had have captured it, what would the skeptics have said? "Malcolm, great job, did you do that on your computer?" I think when it comes to any given UFO sighting, you have to be there yourself. When you see that with your own eyes, that's it, and you have seen it.
Yeah, it's the same with all the Nessie sightings. You know, we had a sighting, but like we said before we went up there, me and Jamie, like, unless you see it yourself, you've got no reason to believe it, have you?
Yes, that's very true. I mean, my resident is just to try and impress upon the people that we are dealing with something very real in Loch Ness. And when we consider the fact that the coelacanth fish, a prehistoric fish, was thought extinct, and that was found in fishermen's nets in 1938 off the coast of Madagascar, and they're still finding this horrible scaly fish today. We're finding species of frogs and insects that we never knew existed. We're finding them on a daily basis.
Okay, Malcolm, well, thanks very much for that. That's very informative.
Yeah, I mean, I could speak about Nessie all day. It's just it's a big passion of mine, and it still is, you know. And my favourite book that I've written is all about Loch Ness. It's got everything. It's got my heart and soul in there. It's got all my expeditions, and it's a wonderful, wonderful subject, Warren.
Yeah, it is, definitely. Thank you very much.
No problem, sir.
Hiya guys, we're at the Weird Weekend North, an annual 40th convention near Warrington in England, and I'll let this well-known guy introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Richard Freeman. I am a cryptozoologist and the zoological director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, which is an organisation which searches for mysterious and monstrous animals all around the world. And I've been on the track of things like the Tasmanian wolf, the giant anaconda, the yeti, the orang pendek, the Russian almasty, the Mongolian deathworm, and of course lake monsters.
Yeah, because this is based around, the documentary is based on Loch Ness, although it's not just based around Nessie, it's all the, the UFO sightings and the weird lights that were there the weekend before we got there, and obviously Alistair Crowley.
Well, it's what would be described as a window area, I suppose.
Yeah.
One of those areas where Fortean flaps happen on a regular basis.
So would you describe it as a hotspot for like paranormal activity around Loch Ness?
Well, yeah, big cats have been seen there. There's been lots of UFO sightings, and of course the sightings of the creature. Now, very interestingly, back in the 1970s, the early 1970s, there was a guy called F.W. Holliday, or Doc Holliday as his nickname was, and he'd written a number of books about fishing. He heard about the Loch Ness Monster, and he wrote a book on the monster sightings. But the more he got into it, the more he investigated it, he became convinced that the Loch Ness Monster wasn't a physical flesh and blood creature as we understand it, but a literal dragon, a malevolent supernatural serpent that existed in the loch. And he wrote a book about it called The Dragon and the Disc, about the relationships between lake monster sightings and UFOs.
Why do you think he came to that conclusion?
He came to that conclusion because he felt that the creature was malevolent, that people that saw it would often have runs of bad luck, cameras would often stop or break or be lost when people tried to photograph it. And he gave a number of examples. There was a guy called Richard Jenkins who moved to Loch Ness in the early 70s, and he and his wife saw the creature from their living room window, and he described it as looking like an enormous stomach with a great length of intestine attached to it, and he described it as obscene, and that the feeling of obscenity stayed with him. Mrs. Greta Finlay and her son, who saw the creature from a pier, she was so frightened of it that she said she would never want to see it again, even if it was behind 6-inch steel bars. And this is not just at Loch Ness, it's other areas as well, because he investigated a lot of Irish lake monster sightings, and he talked to a librarian from Clifton in Ireland called Georgina Carberry, and in the 1950s she had been at Loch Fada, and she and a group of other people who were on this fishing trip had seen this creature emerge in the water from behind an island in the loch, and she described the visible part of it being about 30 feet long. It had shark-like jaws and a great serpentine body, which she described as having been covered in a wormy movement, and it terrified her so badly that she had nightmares about it for years later, and she would never return to the loch. And when they were driving away from the loch in panic, she had this feel of pursuit, as if the creature was somehow pursuing them in the car. And I've heard that story with other monsters as well. I've heard it with the Cornish owl man. A friend of mine, I know is now a very prominent scientist, saw the owl man as a teenager, and he had this feeling it somehow pursued him back to his home, which was miles away from Cornwall, and was lurking in the woods outside of his house, haunting his nightmares. And there's another case of a Bigfoot-like creature being seen in around Bowlam Lake, which is near Newcastle.
You're not going to get
a race of relic hominins living in a country park a few miles from Newcastle city centre. You're going to get them in the forests of the Himalayas or the Pacific Northwest, not near Newcastle. So obviously this is something paranormal, and one witness and her son who had seen this thing said that it frightened them so badly that when they were driving away they had a feeling that it was somehow pursuing them as they were driving them in the car. The beast of Boleham Lake. Looking up on
yeah, no, I'm not denying it. I don't live far from it, and we have to walk the dogs, and it's not very deep at all. I don't think that. No,
but this wasn't something in the water. This was on land. This was a huge hulking man-like figure on land. And my friend John Downs saw it, and he described it as looking almost two-dimensional, as it was a man-shaped hole in reality. As this thing moved around. So it's obviously not a flesh and blood animal. And then most of what I look for around the world are flesh and blood animals. They're just animals we don't know. We don't know about, where they're not yet discovered, or they're thought to be extinct but they're still around, like the Tasmanian wolf. That's my main interest. But there's this other side to it, which seems to be genuinely paranormal.
You've probably heard, I think I read about it in Nick Redfern's book about the remote viewing that the US secret military did some remote viewing kind of experiments, some psyops kind of thing in the 60s, I think. Do you know what I'm talking about on that? They reckon that, I'm probably getting this story all mangled up, but they'd seen the Loch Ness monster, from remote viewing kind of psychic kind of skills, and it was appearing, disappearing, which kind of backs up the story that it's paranormal. And a lot of the viewings, it seems to literally disappear, so it's in and out of, it's travelling across dimensions rather than...
Well, the modern spate of sightings, it started in the 1930s, and of course, as you know, Crowley was down there at the turn of the century at Boleskine House trying to do the ritual of Abramelin the Mage, and one of the things he was trying to do that was in Abramelin the Mage involved contacting Leviathan, and Leviathan is a dragon from Hebrew legend that is supposed to live in the sea, this monstrous great dragon that, according to their beliefs, was put there to show the power of God, that he could create this monstrous entity.
Well, obviously, Nessie, so to speak, was around well before Crowley, wasn't it?
There were sightings going back further than that, but the modern spate started when they built the road alongside the rock. And if you remember, there's a guy called George Spicer who was a tailor from London, and him and his wife were driving along there in 1933, and he saw the creature slither out and the road in front of them, and he described it as being an abomination, which is a very strong word to use. A lot of these people that see these things seem to be very, very badly psychologically shaken by them, which suggests they're more than just a flesh and blood animal. So I have this theory that I've developed called the global monster template, because there are certain types of monster you see in every culture all over the world. First and foremost, there's the dragon. It appears in every single culture on Earth, going back 40,000 years or more. Then you get hairy giants, things like Yeti, Sasquatch, Yowie, in every culture, trolls in Scandinavia. Then you get little people, goblins, gnomes, things like that. You get monstrous birds, thunderbirds, rocks, things like that. You get monstrous dogs, black dogs, bargests, werewolves. You get monstrous cats. And I came up with a theory that these are all sort of echoes or reflections of things that our Australopithecine ancestors on the plains of East Africa 2 million years ago would have been in competition with, or were getting preyed on by. So the Australopithecines came down out of trees to exploit new food sources on the savannas that were growing in Africa at the time, like carrion and things, and they would have been preyed on by crocodiles, which were the most dangerous predators going, pythons, leopards and lions, things like the martial eagle, and we know from fossil record we've got the talon marks in fossilised Australopithecine skulls, African hunting dogs, and they'd have been competition with other primates, other types of Australopithecines, some bigger, some smaller, and things like the giant baboons they had at the time. So I think that these are all manifestations from our prehistoric past, fossil memories, if you were, and that they can manifest from the gestalt or collective human subconscious, and take on a physicality for a time. They can become physically real for a time under certain circumstances or mechanisms. Now, tulpas are something from Tibetan folklore, and it's believed that Tibetan monks under intense concentration can create three-dimensional images of things that other people can see, almost like an artificial ghost created by the power of the mind. And a number of mediums are supposed to have been able to do this. There was a medium, a Polish guy called Franek Kluski, in the early part of the 20th century, who was manifesting animals at seances. So he would manifest a huge bird like a nightjar that sat on his head, and he would manifest a huge lion-like cat that licked the sitter's hands with its rough tongue, and a huge black dog, and an ape-like creature, a huge shambling ape-like creature, strong enough to pick up someone in a chair as if they were nothing. And it was almost as if he was tapping into this template.
Was there any proof of this, of the medium's talents?
There were various
pictures or
there were
video
there are photographs of it. You look at Planet Frank Kluski, you'll see these photographs, one of them with this great bird on his head. And lots of people there at the time said that they saw these things. But it's weird that the things he was manifesting are the things from the global monster template, not just random manifestations, so which gives me pause for thought, you see.
Yeah.
And of course the other theory is that they're interdimensional, they're things that come from another dimension, and that's why they can appear and disappear. Theoretical physicists have postulated as many as 11 different dimensions, so these things could be slipping through from other dimensions where they are naturalistic creatures that just somehow come into our dimension.
So that's what Nessie could be, for example.
Could be, yeah. And I've talked to a couple of Muslims about their belief in jinn. That's where we get the word genie from, and they're supposed to be spirits made of smokeless fire, which you could interpret in the modern parlance as energy. And they say that they manifest as dragons, huge apes, monstrous birds, huge black dogs and black cats, which once again seems to be part of the global monster template. And if you look at so-called aliens and alien abductions, they're just updatings of fairy lore, because fairies in lore, they're not these pretty little Disney things with wings. They can be quite grotesque and dangerous and something to be feared, and they would kidnap people, take them away, and the people would lose track of time. They think they'll be away for an hour, they come back and they've been away for days.
So do you think they're being snatched into a different dimension and then put back again?
Possibly, but I think what we call aliens are just an updating of the same phenomena, and we're seeing it through a different filter. We live in a technological age, so we're seeing them as aliens rather than as fairies.
What about, I think I mentioned to you, the weekend before we got to Loch Ness, there was lights seen in the sky near Drumlin Rocket and Castle Urquhart, which looked like kaleidoscope kind of things. There was one on the Friday night, was there for about 3 hours, and on the Saturday night there was 3 of them moving about a bit, and they weren't that high up. Have you got any?
Well, these weird lights, I'm writing a book at the minute called The Highest Strangeness, about very weird Fortean cases, and strange lights and light phenomena, they appear alongside monsters, ghosts, UFOs, fairy lore. The light seems to be an integral part of it. So it's a bit like the story of the blind man and the elephants, where all the blind men try and describe what an elephant is by touching different parts of it. One says it's like a great snake because of the trunk, one says it's like a spear because he's touching the tusks, one says it's like a great boulder because he's touching the side, one says it's like a tree because he's touching the leg. They're all parts of a greater whole that we don't understand.
So, the fact that the lights were seen the weekend before we got there, and then we saw something on the Wednesday, was it? About a few days later, it could have, they could have been connected.
Yeah, it's
Nessie
called
the lights. Yeah.
A Fortean flat.
Yeah.
And these things happen. You'll find it.
Like a cluster of events.
Yeah, people will see UFOs in the same area. People are seeing Bigfoots, and there'll be a poltergeist outbreak. It all seems to happen. Like buses coming in threes, it all seems to happen together in clusters. Now that's not to say that there's not real flesh and blood mystery animals. Of course there are. Of course, I don't think the Yeti is a real animal. It's either a great ape or a relic hominid. There are things like the Tasmanian wolf, which is supposedly extinct marsupial, but it's almost certainly still around. Giant anacondas, things like that. But then there are these other ones that are in tandem with other phenomena and behave in very bizarre ways and bring great terror with them. They call it the nameless dread, this fear that comes with these sightings.
Okay, that's great. Thanks a lot, Richard.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers. So we're going to move on to the area around Boleskine House now, which is where the famous occultist Aleister Crowley lived for a number of years. It's on the banks of Loch Ness. Aleister was alleged to have tried performing a ritual there. He was trying to summon a holy guardian. There was rumours that a lot of strange goings-ons have happened at the house. I'll be talking to someone who actually stayed there soon. But I actually spoke to a lady called Leanne Milne who lived in the Loch Ness, who has lived in the Loch Ness area for quite a number of years. And in the year 2001, when she was about 14, she went down to the burial ground, which is just below the house, with a couple of friends, and had quite a bizarre experience, quite a scary experience. And this is what she told me. It was summertime when they'd gone down there, and a couple of hours into being down there, things took a strange turn and the atmosphere changed, which she says was difficult to explain. And out of nowhere, literally out of nowhere, a stag appeared with an owl on its back, and it soon disappeared again, just vanished into thin air. And then everything continued to feel really quite unpleasant, and we thought we'd go over the wall and down the hill to get to the loch. And as we approached the wall, there was a real sense of dread which Leanne couldn't explain. And suddenly they all witnessed a huge dark beast on two legs come rushing out of the right hand side and run at a huge pace to the left. Now obviously they were pretty shook up at this point, and they went into a hut that's by the graveyard. It's made of bricks. I think it's where they used to keep dead bodies at the turn of the 19th century before they got put into the ground. But apparently the atmosphere in there was in a total league of its own. And the final straw was when one of Leanne's friends actually broke down, and they all heard these whispering, menacing, disembodied voices, like the voices were slithering between them all. So the three of them upped and left and started walking back towards Dorez, where they planned to phone someone to come and get them. And apparently that journey on foot should take about 2 hours. Well, apparently, according to Leanne, they got there in about half an hour. Again, suggesting, similar to a lot of other paranormal experiences, that time just doesn't seem to work normally. So that's Leanne's story, which was pretty terrifying. We also met another guy who we'll speak to now, who had another ghostly experience in the same graveyard. I'm here with a guy called Matta, who lives. How long have you lived in the area?
15 years.
15 years.
Yeah.
And obviously the documentary is not just about Nessie, it's about all the kind of paranormal, whatever, supernatural, weird occurrences in the area. And this graveyard's had a lot of stories about it, and the aura, and Matta had a pretty weird...
Yeah, pretty crazy experience.
You want to tell us about it?
Yeah, of course. So there was 4 of us. We came up. We had heard all about Aleister Crowley and all that sort of stuff. Wanted to come see what it was like. So we came down this here. We heard loads of weird noises. Like it was almost as if someone dragging something heavy across the ground. And we were all a bit like standing there, like.
Was this in the night time or?
Yeah. It was quite late at night. But there was no one else here. There was no other cars parked. And then the 4 of us were sort of looking in this direction. And 2 of us saw one thing, 2 of us saw another thing. So 2 of us saw just a bright light, a really bright light, that started just kind of where that stone wall is. And just kind of went along for maybe about 4 or 5 gravestones and disappeared. But myself and one of my other friends saw the figure of a man with like a oil lamp, sort of walking like that, and he just walked sort of like that and then disappeared into the gravestone. So we were a bit miffed by it, like it couldn't have been the reflection of the moon. Like, we were all quite sceptical people, so we were trying to think of everything that it could have been, but still to this day I can't really explain.
And you've never been back since then, have
I've
you?
never been back since, yeah.
And you said you were a bit kind of...
Yeah, well, even when we got in the car and drove off, and this was maybe about like April, May, it's a bit warmer at that time of year, and the car just spun out, like just up there, for no reason at all. We didn't know, like, we couldn't explain it.
How do you mean?
It was almost as if there was oil in the road.
Well, you just like lost traction?
Yeah, we just spun out.
Yeah?
Done maybe like 2 360s or something like that. And then we were just like, what the hell just happened?
And the road wasn't snowy, right? You know,
no, it wasn't
totally
icy.
normal.
No. It would be about maybe 10, 12 degrees at that time. Yeah.
So was anyone hurt, or did you stay?
No, we just spun and then we were all in shock and we were like, right, let's get out of here. And then,
Weird.
yeah, we'd never come back until today. So hopefully that doesn't happen again.
So we're actually right by where you saw the the fella with the lantern. Does it feel any weird or not?
It does feel a bit weird, yeah.
Because a lot of people say they can feel like a weird aura in the area around Loch Ness. I mean, I can't. But like Aleister Crowley's house is literally just like 100 metres above the graveyard. You know, we've got the Loch Ness literally just down over there. What do you know about Aleister Crowley?
So he was a very eccentric individual who was sort of shunned by the local community. The local community at the time was heavily like Christian. The Church of Scotland was really quite powerful up here. They still were up until 10 years ago. They had a lot of say in what sort of shops were opening and stuff like that. But he started a religion called Volima, which is basically like do what you will as long as you don't harm other people, basically. So yeah, he was sort of shunned by the locals for that, and then I think a lot of these stories about him sort of like going into the graveyard and like stealing bodies to do rituals and stuff like that.
There's supposed to be a tunnel, isn't there, from the house?
Yeah, there is.
To the graveyard. A few people we spoke to said they know where it is. We can't find it.
Yeah, I mean most locals are just like, they accept that there is a tunnel. Yeah. So there's enough people saying that there's a tunnel.
Because the house, I know the Boleskine Foundation at the moment are converting that. You know, it's got the roof on.
Yep. They're
converting it into like a library of esoteric books all around about the area. You know, but I think Aleister himself was quite misunderstood, wasn't he? He was portrayed as like evil and a beast. Where I don't know if he was. You know, like you say, he was.
Yeah, I think he was just eccentric, extremely eccentric, I suppose, at the time. So people, conjured up all these random stories about him.
And he did his ritual, which is, a really well-known story. You know,
about him.
Apparently, whether he closed the portal he'd opened or not, which could explain.
Yeah, I mean that's a common story. Yeah, that he was doing a big ritual and left it open. Yeah, so I suppose we better close it. Stop anything else happening. Yeah.
So I wonder if we saw Nessie right here, which was a bizarre location to see it. You know, right where. I don't know if this is the hub of paranormal activity in the area.
Yeah, perhaps it's a reasonable theory.
Yeah, and the lights were seen literally basically not far. Where's Castle Urquhart from here?
It should just kind of be like across.
Is that way?
Right in there.
Yeah. So that's not far from where the lights were seen either, which all kind of centres on where we are right here.
Yeah. It's strange that there's so many different stories in this area.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Moving on. Someone who has actually stayed in Boleskine House for 3 weeks is Gordon Scott, who for over 40 years has been an occult mystic and artist. For 17 years he was a student of Amador Crowley, who was the son of Aleister Crowley, 12 years as Amador's initiate, and lived with him in his last UK spiritual community. So he's quite a knowledgeable person on the whole Aleister Crowley and Amador Crowley and Boleskine House, and let's meet him. I'm here with Gordon Scott, who's a Glaswegian, but you actually lived. Well, you've stayed. We're talking kind of about Aleister Crowley and Boleskine House, because Gordon's kind of got a bit of a connection to the house. And
yes, I stayed there for 3 weeks in 1985.
In the house.
Yeah. I was caretaking it for the Dent family who had gone on holiday to Morocco, and they asked me to come up and take care of the place for 3 weeks. The last week of October and into the fortnight early November. I think the more and more I've thought about it, the more and more it's come back to me, the detail. Having said that, in retrospect, one is supposed to become wiser as the years go on, and I think when you look that far back to the mid-80s, to a guy who's 22 years old, and you think, well, actually I missed so much. So although the memory resonates with me now and I can evoke it and it becomes very vivid, the one thing that I do recall is how peaceful the house is, how quiet it is, but yet there's a presence of watchfulness. And I've lived in many different houses, and I think that Boleskine singularly stands out as a very peculiar atmosphere, nothing run-of-the-mill about the place. And yet you have to untie yourself from the fact that Alistair owned it for 10, 11 years, and Jimmy Page owned it, and there is a whole load of people who have added their energy, their value judgments, their intent to the, I don't know, cloud over the house, or the...
I spoke to a couple of people who've told me rather scary ghost stories almost, that when they've been in the Boleskine burial grounds, you know, someone saw a miner carrying a lamp, but the other story I heard was someone saw a beast kind of rush across the graveyard. How would you describe that kind of psychic phenomenon?
I think it's entirely likely that some places are liminal places, where the veil between the manifest world and the invisible world of spirit, that world there and then, as opposed to this world here and now, that veil, that barrier is thin. And yes, you might imagine that there are opportunistic spirits or entities which are aware of this thinness, and people by happen chance venture across a threshold, and bingo, there is an exchange that takes place, a revelation, something that could be a signal to that person saying, cuckoo, hello, you're ready, you have seen, you are be you marked.
Do you think?
And so,
with our Nessie sighting, not exactly in that spot as well, I mean, could that have been, I was mentioned to Richard Freeman about the interdimensional thing, which is, you know, could be, you know, crossing the veil kind of thing.
Sure.
Could that have been?
Yeah, I mean, of course.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the thing. You having experienced this are adding a whole ream of your own thoughts and feelings and emotions to the event. It's already had a marked effect upon you, and that has enabled some form of change within you, and that will gradually evolve. But the signal is that event has signaled a change to you. It should not just be an anecdote that you share ever after. It's meant to be a point of departure. Having had an engagement with a paranormal experience, what do you do next? Not just share the story 100 times, but make a change in your life.
Now, right at the very start of the documentary, I did mention that me and Jamie, the cameraman, did have a very, you know, incredible experience ourselves. We actually saw something in Loch Ness, which very well could be Nessie, the Loch Ness monster. It happened on the second day we were in around Loch Ness. Me and Jamie had driven down to Boleskine House to have a look at the graveyard and the house itself. And as we were pulling up to the graveyard where you can see down into the loch, I was driving, Jamie's in the passenger seat. I could see out the corner of my eye, I saw something like a big upturned brown boat. And Jamie suddenly shouted, "Stop!" So I slammed the brakes on in the car. By the time the car stopped, there was actually trees obscuring our view, so I quick reverse back. And by that time, whatever was there had submerged, but there was ripples exactly where we'd seen it. And Jamie had actually seen the hump. He described it as like a whale hump. He'd seen it for about 3 or 4 seconds, whereas I just caught a glimpse. And Jamie, well, I'll let Jamie describe it himself. You know what? Because I interviewed, I spoke to Jamie as soon as we'd seen it, and this has actually been recorded as the first unexplained sighting in Loch Ness for 2022. If you go on the register, there's a Loch Ness register, tells you all about every sighting there's ever been in Loch Ness, and ours is the first one in 2022. And it was reported in loads of Scottish newspapers and on Lad Bible, which has 37 million viewers. You know, and we'd gone up there talking about it in the car. You know, can you imagine if we see something? And we actually did. Anyway, so here's Jamie.
So we were just driving along the road here, and I looked to my right, just across the cemetery here, and just over that tree line there, saw this massive, big. I literally said, "Well, like, what's that?" It's massive. Sort of like hump. Well, at first I thought it was like a big boulder or something, but it was in the middle of the loch. So obviously that's impossible. And it was kind of grey and shiny. And I said to Warren, I said, "Quick, like, you know, stop the car, quick!" And by that point, we're slightly further up the road, so whatever I'd seen was behind the tree line and obscured, so I couldn't see it. So we reversed back, got out, and you could just see like the waves, like a pool, where whatever it was had disappeared. Like, obviously it's not there now. So then that's when I knew, you know, it's not like a rock or you know, like a boulder or anything. It was obviously clearly something in the loch that had disappeared. So I managed to snap some photos on my phone of the sort of the waves from it. But yeah, it was just it was big as well. It was like, you know, it had to have been bigger than 10 foot.
It was way bigger than that.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I glimpsed it out the corner of my eye.
Yeah.
What the hell was that?
And I mean, because with it being sort of the middle of the loch, I mean, it's quite a way out. And it, like, as you can see from the footage, the it's just calm. There's literally no waves at all today. It's just still water. It's so calm. And you know, there's been no boats when we've seen it. There's been no boats. As I've been filming the waves left from it, like a small speedboat was coming up, and you could see it was way bigger than that.
It must have been it was over 10 metres.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You know,
and it reminded us of like a whale or something, like you know, like coming up. All I could see was like this, you know, like an arc, kind of, you know. But it's just amazing, really. Like I can't explain that at all. Like, there's nothing else you could explain it as other than something in the loch, you know, that's moving about.
Because we came up here totally neutral, sceptical,
yeah.
You know, no preconceived ideas. You know, to be honest, we weren't sure. You know, obviously there's no smoke without fire. There's been loads of sightings, but I mean, we've just actually blooming seen something.
Yeah.
You know, it was amazing. If we'd have got here like 10-15 seconds earlier, we'd have stopped the car and got it on camera.
Yeah.
We've got, like I say, we'll put on screen the weird kind of wake of it, which was definitely abnormal.
Yeah.
And we're right outside Boleskine House, and as you can see, the graveyard's right there as well.
Yeah.
And that's exactly where we blooming saw the where we saw it.
And it wasn't like something that, you know, it wasn't in the corner of my eye. Like, I literally looked at it. It was direct on, and I seen it. And it was there, and
because I was driving, I saw something out the corner of my eye, and I thought it was a boat or something.
Yeah, but I literally looked at it directly on, and it was there. And at first thought, I thought, oh, you know, like that's a big, like boulder, but it was like kind of shiny and wet. But so I thought, well, you know, there's not going to be a boulder in the middle floating. Yeah. So, and obviously by the time we've reversed back, it's gone. So, you know, it's definitely like went back under the water. But yeah, like myself, I believe in science, you know, like I'm quite a skeptical person, but I literally cannot explain what I've seen there. That's very weird, really strange.
And to finish the documentary, the last person we spoke to was probably very well known if you're into Loch Ness, is Steve Feltham, who's lived in a caravan around the loch for 31 years. And we had the great pleasure to meet him and discuss our own sighting as well, and what Steve's views are after 31 years of living on the loch. So I'm here on the banks of Loch Ness with Steve Feltham. How long have you been here, Steve?
31 years, full time.
31 years, wow. We'll get straight to the point. What's your views today on, what is it, 2021?
2022.
2022, nearly April. What's your views on Nessie?
Still something to be explained. We don't know what. Things keep getting seen. sonar keeps picking up contacts with things. So, yeah, the mystery goes on, really. We're not much closer than when I first arrived to finding the answer. A few more pieces of evidence along the way, but it's a slow job.
Have you ever seen anything from your actual caravan here? Hang on.
The van used to be mobile, so when I was parked at Fort Augustus, I saw something. This was in the first year. Something went across the bay like a torpedo going through the water. Just a spray of water off the back of something. That was tantalising. Too brief to get a picture of, and since then I'm waiting for the second sighting.
So 30 years.
Yeah.
As a patient man.
A world champion of patience.
So this is static now then?
Yeah.
How long has it been static?
This century, all this century, I've expanded out here on Dawes Beach.
Yeah. So you obviously love it here.
I do love it here. I mean, in all the travelling round and round Loch Ness that I did for 10 years, this was always my base because it's by far the best view you're going to get of Loch Ness.
Yeah. I was just thinking though, as Jamie the cameraman said, with you being right on the bank, Nessie's not going to come too close, would she or he or they?
Nessie seems to know I'm here and stay away from here, really.
Yeah.
Sightings seem to be anywhere I'm not.
Because I told you earlier, me and Jamie mentioned, when we pulled up at Boleskine burial ground this morning, we had the most bizarre experience. We actually thought, we saw something. I saw what looked like an upturned boat out of the corner of my eyes. I was driving, Jamie shouted stop.
Yeah.
And he said it looks like a big whale. Obviously by the time we got out of the car with the camera or the phone.
Well, that's the classic description, upturned boat.
Yeah.
That's what people do describe. And you have got a photograph of a disturbance.
Yeah.
So unless that's associated with the speedboat that was going around the area, which it could be, I don't know what route they were on.
Yeah.
But yeah, it wasn't nothing. Something disturbed the water.
Well, the thing is, I mean, it was the disturbance of the whirling was exactly where we saw the hump, basically a massive hump. It was like Jamie says it because he got a much better view. It was about 6 foot out of the water, and at least 5 meters long. Yeah, and it looked kind of like whaley kind of skin. But
certainly, that's the sort of sighting that I would tell Gary Campbell with the register.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we were on the cruise Loch cruise on the Spirit of Loch Ness.
All right, excellent.
And Sean was telling us, they think it's an eel. But I mean, this wasn't an eel. No way. What's your view on the eels?
The driver of the boat thinks there's a UFO on the bottom of the loch. So.
Well. Yeah. I'm not saying there isn't.
I know.
We're investigating it all.
Yeah.
So, on the different angles, rather than the actual, Nessie creature or whatever it is, there was some lights seen, again, bizarrely kind of coinciding with us coming up here on the Friday and Saturday before we got here on the Monday. There was lights seen above Drumnad Rocket.
Right above Urquhart Castle.
Yeah. How far is Urquhart?
Urquhart Castle.
Can you see it from it?
Yeah, you can. You can see a green field.
Yeah, aye.
Yeah, it's just down on the shore there. So 6 miles from here. So I couldn't see anything from
Is that 6 miles to where them fields are then?
Aye.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Is it? I didn't think that, would you? Think it's about a mile?
No, that's 6 miles. And yeah, apparently quite a few people in Drumnad Rocket were phoning each other around saying, what's that? So, don't know.
Yeah.
Multicoloured apparently.
Yeah, well I've got a few pictures. I'm trying to get a better quality one, but it was like a kaleidoscope kind of thing.
Aye, that's what I saw in the pictures, yeah.
Yeah, it was like apparently there was one on the Friday night and 3 of them on the Saturday night.
Yeah, I heard that,
yeah. And again with, there's quite a few people, it wasn't just one person.
No,
there was
exactly, yeah.
So I'm hoping I can find someone who's got actual video of it.
Somebody must have.
I know, yeah. So at least better quality pictures, but I'm trying to find out how they were moving as well. Have you heard anything yet about? No.
It's not beyond belief that it would be a drone, that somebody's up getting a night shot of the castle.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't think they'd be there for the whole night, whole evening.
Yeah, well, apparently they're there for about 4 hours, weren't they?
Yeah.
And Willie Cameron we spoke to was saying they're too big to be drones, really.
Right, yeah.
And there could have been them lantern kind of things, but again,
They would move up.
Yeah, they'd be blown away, wouldn't they? They wouldn't
it's a location for oddness, definitely.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. The whole area.
Yeah.
Obviously you've got the Loch Ness monster, Nessie, then you've got Boleskine House with Aleister Crowley, and there has been a few odd UFO sightings in the area, hasn't there? And again, bizarrely enough, these lights, just the other day.
Absolutely, yeah.
I mean, and people have mentioned ley lines and...
Yeah.
I mean, do you think the whole area is,
It's got a certain energy to it, the whole area, which is palpable, I think.
Yeah.
The sort of presence of the place, and alien big cats, certainly up the glen over the other side. They've been spotted up there. One was caught up there actually at Cannock.
Yeah, I think Willie mentioned that people have been letting pumas loose.
Well, that was a puma. It's stuffed in Inverness Museum.
Is it?
Yeah.
And what do you mean by alien big
That's
cat?
what they're called, alien big cats, ABCs. The ones that are purported in
Okay.
certainly in the Highlands.
Kind of cryptids, kind of.
Just unidentified.
Yeah.
Just reports of.
Yeah. Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
Brilliant. So I hope you've enjoyed the documentary. Lots of food for thought there. Obviously proving, I think, beyond doubt that there's a very strange place is Loch Ness. So many strange things happen there. And as it was said, they'll probably go on forever and ever. Who knows? Is it an interdimensional portal? Who knows what it is? But I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you.